Let's be very clear about what we're here to talk about today. We're not here to discuss speculation or hot tips or lottery tickets. We're here to discuss the architecture of wealth, the engineering, the actual process of building something durable, something that's designed to last.
All right, let's start with a couple of numbers. Just two. Over the last 30 years, if you just held a standard benchmark portfolio, you would have seen an average return of about 8.8% a year. But the average U.S. investor over that same period, they only saw a return of 4.8%.
Now, a 4% difference might not sound like much year to year, but let's look at the physics of that gap. Over 3 decades, the power of compounding turns that small leak into an enormous chasm. We're talking about an $840,000 difference in potential net worth. That is a life-changing amount of money left on the table.
And to be perfectly clear, this isn't because the market failed. The returns were there for the taking. No, this is a failure of human behavior. So the big question, the one we have to answer, is what's causing all this self-inflicted financial damage? And that brings us to a fundamental truth about building wealth. The single greatest threat to your financial plan isn't a market crash, it's not a recession, it's not inflation. It's the person you see in the mirror every morning.
When you dig into the data, it's pretty shocking. This massive underperformance, it's rarely because people pick bad investments. Not really. It is almost entirely the result of bad timing, getting swept up in the excitement and buying high, and then letting fear take over and selling low.
You know, there's actually a name for this. It's called the behavior gap. It's the measurable difference between what an investment returns and what the investor actually gets. It's the price you pay for making decisions based on emotion instead of logic. It's a tax on panic. So how do we counteract that emotion? We have to understand the cold, hard mechanics of accumulation. And that entire process, it really begins with one critical milestone. The late, great Charlie Munger, he put it, well, pretty bluntly. He wasn't trying to be elegant, he was being honest. Getting to that first $100,000 isn't about being a brilliant investor. It's about brute force. It's about discipline. It's about fighting against the inertia of starting from nothing. Just look at the math here. Let's say you invest $10,000 a year. After 8 years, you'll have about $100,000. But look closer. 80,000 of that, a full 80%, came directly from your savings. The market, your returns, they did very little of the heavy lifting. You did the work. And this really highlights a critical concept, the difference between your human capital and your financial capital. Early on, your most powerful wealth-building tool is your ability to earn an income and save it. Your savings rate matters infinitely more than your rate of return. You're literally building the foundation with your own 2 hands. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once that foundation is poured and set, the physics of the whole equation, they change completely. You start to build real momentum. You start to approach what we call escape velocity. The moment you cross that $100,000 threshold, your money starts to seriously work for you. The second $100,000 comes way faster than the first, and the third comes even faster than that. That little snowball you started is now an avalanche, and it's rolling downhill all on its own. But right as your portfolio is really starting to take off, a new set of threats emerges. And these threats, they're not out there in the market. Nope, they're neurological. They're inside your own head. We have to understand how our brains are fundamentally flawed when it comes to risk. First up is something called loss aversion. Neuroscientists have found that our brains are hardwired to feel the pain of a loss about twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equal gain. And that imbalance, that's what causes a perfectly rational person to panic and sell everything right at the bottom of a market correction.
Next, we've got the herd mentality. As humans, we're social creatures. We feel safe when we're in a crowd, doing what everyone else is doing. But in investing, the crowd is almost always wrong. The herd stampedes to buy at the peak of a bubble and sells in a panic during a crash. Following the herd is a guaranteed ticket to mediocrity.
And third is a sneaky one, confirmation bias. We all have a natural tendency to seek out information that confirms what we already believe. If you're worried about a crash, you'll suddenly find a dozen articles that agree with you, and you'll completely ignore the mountains of data that suggest otherwise. It creates a dangerous echo chamber inside your own mind. So if our own minds are wired to be the enemy, what's the solution? Well, you have to build a system, an unemotional, disciplined framework that takes you out of the decision-making process when it matters most. You can use this simple 4-step process. First, recognize the emotion you're feeling, fear, greed, whatever it is. Second, reflect on your long-term plan. Has anything fundamentally changed? Third,
Reframe the situation, remembering the biases we just talked about. And finally, respond in a way that aligns with your principles, not with the noise of the moment. And these right here, these are the tools of the architect. A written financial plan, rules for rebalancing, automatic contributions. This isn't just a portfolio, it's a machine, and it's designed to act like a logical circuit breaker, protecting the entire system from your own worst emotional impulses.
And at the end of the day, all of this comes down to a fundamental choice. It's really a choice about who you want to be. Are you building something with intention, or are you just placing a bet and hoping for the best?
You have to understand this. Long-term success in this game has very little to do with being a genius. It's not about predicting the next big thing. It all comes down to temperament, to emotional control, and to the simple discipline of executing a good plan over a very, very long time.
Real, lasting wealth isn't something you find. It's not a lottery ticket you stumble upon. It's a cathedral. It's something you have to build, piece by piece, over decades of work. So the only question you have to answer for yourself is, are you going to be its architect, or will you just keep gambling, hoping the doors magically swing open for you? The choice is entirely yours.